Hello everyone, Josh Jones here, your Michigan criminal defense attorney. And today's video is probably one of the most important videos that I'm going to be putting up. And the reason that it's important is, it'll tie to multiple articles that I have out on my blog. So there's going to be a lot of links probably tied on this video specifically into this post. But the reason that it's the most important is because I believe that it controls a lot of situations. And the reason that I say it controls a lot of situations is because it's all on the individual. And what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is we're talking about consent. Anytime that we're talking about a search, we're talking about incriminating statements, anytime that we're talking about interactions with a police officer, it all comes down to the amount of consent that the individual has or provides in the situation to the officer. Because consent can override and waive constitutional requirements for warrants. It allows for warrantless searches to happen, even if there's an exception and the officer is unable to meet that exception. Consent is the exception to that exception. Consent to search, consent to talk, consent to come in, all of that comes down to the individual that's approached by the officer. So we're going to break it down into hypothetical, and I think that's why these videos are so important, is because I can really articulate the hypotheticals. We'll use a traffic stop. Traffic stop is completely valid. Now, in that traffic stop, the officer approaches the individual driver on the driver's side. Driver rolls down their window. And the officer asks who they are, whether or not they have license, registration, and insurance. Now, at this time, under my hypothetical, all of this is fine. Meaning everything is legit, everything is good. However, the individual officer then asks the individual driver whether or not they've been drinking. Well, when you answer that, that could be consent, or that is consent, and that could be incriminating. My apologies. Now, maybe the question isn't, have you been drinking? We're going to now get into the real consent, which is the officer asks just nonchalantly, everything's fine. Well, may I search your vehicle? It's pretty routine, sir, that I search everyone's vehicle before I part ways with them. May I search your vehicle? Now, when we're talking about the consent, the exception to the search warrant, we are talking about here the blanket rule. You saying, yes, you may search, that's consent. The officer has no reasonable suspicion under my hypothetical, very limited, under my hypothetical, to search your vehicle. But by you consenting allows for that. We will switch the hypothetical completely and talk about the home, where if you looked at the video regarding a warrant, you'll know that under the home, you almost always need a warrant to search that home. However, what if we talk about an individual allowing the officer, consenting the officer to come in? They have no warrant. Officer comes in. They then see something. Well, that will allow for, or the possibility for, them to use whatever they saw against the individual if it's incriminating, or if it's contraband, or if it's criminality. The reason I say this is the consent to allow for them to come in allows for a lot of other things to come into play. If you never consented for that officer to come into your home, you may or may not have been safe. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the biggest thing that I can give you on this video. Anytime an officer asks you for your consent to either make a statement, to search property, to search you, to pat you down, deny that. Force their hand. An officer is asking for your consent because they likely or may not have the ability to do what they want to do, which is to search you, which is to get you to talk, which is to pat you down, or to even stop you. And that will be another video that I'll include in here, is that initial encounter, that initial seizure, whether or not you have the ability to do that. That even rests under consent. You have the ability to always deny consent to an officer. Force their hand. It'll be in a court of law, possibly, where the determination on whether or not they had what they believe they had in order to do what they wanted to do to you without consent will be legal and constitutional. But that's for another time. And that might be later on. But it's up to you, ladies and gentlemen, to say, no, I do not consent. Go check out the other videos. You'll have a lot more information after all that. You guys have a great day.